So we're now once again bringing you the remote teaching and learning series of seminars. So again, I'm here now to introduce our speaker. So our resource person for today is actually the Chancellor and Professor of the University of the Philippines, Open University. She is also the chair of Asian Massive Open Line Course Steering Committee since 2016. She is also the Asian Association of Open Universities president, and also a recipient, the second Gawad Pangulo for Excellence in Public Service in 2017. She is one of the UP Professional Chair Award for Teaching and Public Service. She has delivered more than 20 plenary or keynote messages or speeches on topics which include open and distance e-learning, massive open online courses, ICT4D, quality assurance in ODEL, and many more during the last 2 years. She has served more than 20 years of teaching and doing research on open distance e-learning. Our source person has also published numerous book, chapters, and journal articles on open distance e-learning, and most of which focus on the use of modern ICTs for education. She has also initiated and spearheaded the design and implementation of massive open online courses at UPOU and, of course, in the Philippines in 2012. She is actively involved in training, capability building, and related development initiatives with open distance e-learning as the main strategy, with ICT4D and CT4E as the frameworks. So, ladies and gentlemen, I'm here very proud to present to you Dr. Melinda Dela Peña, Bandalaria, PhD. Dr. Mel?
Yes, thank you very much, Rod, for that kind introduction. And I greet everyone, especially our webinar participants. A pleasant day to all of you. It is a pleasure to be with you again, especially to those who have joined us since our webinar session number 1. And as mentioned already, this is the 4th of the 7 webinar sessions that UPOU has organized together with the ICT MC Mindanao Cluster 1. So I also thank the MC1 team for making the past 3 sessions and our session today possible. Your hard work is really paying off, having this large audience and participation in all our webinar series. I must also congratulate those who have already received their certificate. So it's also a good feeling, right? That after engaging with a webinar session, speakers, and also with our fellow participants, it is also somehow a feeling of accomplishment that we get our certificate as proof of our participation in this activities, virtual activities, because of the restrictions that we still have travel, so we cannot be in one place to conduct this activity. So allow me now to share my my slides. So, okay, so one of the questions that is always asked when we do webinar sessions like this for remote instruction, online teaching is it's hard enough to keep our learners engaged in the classroom setting. So what more if they are not with us, like in the remote teaching that we are preparing for the next school year. So admittedly, it is really difficult. But we at least should try to implement some instructional strategies that will not only facilitate the learning of our students, but will also keep them engaged. And in the process, will also make their learning journey an enjoyable one. So this morning, in my newsfeed, there was this article titled, America's Great Remote Learning Experiment. what surveys of teachers and parents tell us about how it went. So as we know, when schools close during the months of February and March, so there was this rush to remote teaching and learning. It was a discussion that I've had during our first webinar session. So they are now looking at the experience. How was that experience of transitioning to remote teaching provided us with some insights. So the surveys conducted offer more evidence that educators were right to worry that remote learning would exacerbate inequities. That is, if we will insist on online learning for everyone. So the social inequalities will really be highlighted. But then again, we have to look at what kind of delivery model will be appropriate for the context of our students. So it is because that inequality is because of the gap in access to technology and the internet. It was also observed that engagement with schoolwork was relatively low. And there is the challenge of keeping the students engaged, as I had mentioned earlier. So in the survey, teachers and parents agree that they needed help and lacked strategies to keep kids engaged and motivated to learn remotely. Some parents even qualify it to say keeping the students engaged in good activities. So for this session, in fact, I called the attention of Director Tess. I said, this is exactly what we will be discussing this morning. And we were right all along in terms of including this particular topic in the series, in the webinar sessions that we will be holding or organizing for our educators. So let's take a look. So as I had mentioned, these are the topics. Designing learning in remote instructional mode of delivery, and keeping the learners engaged in a remote instruction. For these two topics, I would also like to use the bridge figure that I used during our first session. So, and how important is the role of this bridge when we are teaching with our students remotely? Designing learning and keeping the learners engaged are two important aspects which can be classified under the well-designed instructional materials and packages component of the bridge. These two components, instructional materials, learning activities, are critical so that we can ensure that learning and not only teaching will continue. So we have to take note of that. As teachers, our attention will always be how can I continue teaching? But at the same time, we have to ensure that in the process of our teaching, learning will also continue. So and in the process also, we have to ensure course completion or preventing dropout among our students. As we are also trying to reduce in the course of our designing the courses, we are reducing the feeling of isolation and at the same time promote connection or sense of belongingness among our students. As I mentioned earlier also, the whole thing, the whole experience, our objective is to make it as enjoyable as possible to our students. Okay, so let us first discuss designing learning. So before we go any further, and I guess there are also many teachers watching this webinar session, let us do a self-reflection, those who are teaching, by answering the question, how do I teach? The paradigm or school of thought that we subscribe to influences the kind of learning design that we are doing for our courses. So Kember in 1997 forwarded this continuum in two teaching paradigms, teacher or content-centered, up-to-learner or learning-centered, with the different instructional methods classified under each paradigm. Note that there is the middle ground between the two, which probably most of us are subscribing to. So there is this observation that in the classroom or face-to-face teaching, most teachers subscribe to the teacher or content-centered instruction. And the most that can happen is up to that middle ground, wherein the students, through the student-teacher interaction, discover knowledge, but still based on the framework of the teacher. As what is happening when we do a direct lecture, or teacher does a direct lecture, and we synthesize the knowledge of what we have read from the reference materials, from the different learning resources, lecture that to our students, and now guide our students in constructing the knowledge, but still within the framework or how we frame the lesson or the knowledge or the information that we got from the different learning resources. Sometimes it can also be because of the discipline, the nature of the discipline that we are teaching, which will really demand from us teachers a direct lecture, direct transmission of information to our students. And also sometimes it's because of the limited hour of our interaction, the duration of the class hour that we have when we do face-to-face or classroom teaching. So there is also this proposition that remote instruction can provide the opportunity to transition to student or learning-centered instruction. So let's have that kind of reflection as we continue to discuss the learning design for remote instruction. So what exactly do we mean when we say designing learning or instructional design, especially for remote instruction? So it is the development or creation of the learning activities. It is the process of planning and structuring and sequencing learning activities. Sometimes our role as a teacher is to make sure that when we give learning activities to our students, we will start with something simple, and then evolve into a more complex activity in the process of facilitating learning of the concept. In some other strategies, and I think those who are teachers, educators participating in this webinar session, there is this strategy now they call flipping the Bloom's taxonomy, wherein we start with the creation, we start with something that is already created, and then extract the concept or the theories behind something that has already been done. So again, depending on the kind of teaching paradigm that we subscribe to, then we design these activities. Again, what we really have to look into is whether these activities that we are designing can facilitate the achievement of the learning outcomes as far as our students are concerned. So note that these learning activities that we design, and if we recall that comment in the survey, we have to keep our students engaged in good activities. So when we design these learning activities, we are not only facilitating the learning process, but we are keeping our students engaged. So throughout, not only for that particular lesson, but probably also throughout the duration of the course. So I can cite an example in my course. I usually ask my students to do group project or collaborate to complete a project or a course requirement that they need to submit to complete the course that I am teaching or they had enrolled in. So the group project, because they need to collaborate, they need to work together, somehow makes the student connected because they have to communicate with each other, they have to collaborate, they have to work together. In the process of doing so, they became friends, and they became part of the social and professional networks of each other, which is something that they maintain not only throughout the course, but even after graduation. So we are already giving that kind of networking and the kind of, or the opportunity to connect with their fellow learners. So when we start designing our online course or in the remote instruction, our first step is to answer the question, what do my students need to learn? What is it that they should, the knowledge that they should have, the skills that they should learn after completing the course? So we have to note that we teachers will not be starting from zero unless you will be teaching the course for the first time. Then probably there will be more works to do. But if you've been teaching the course in the classroom or face-to-face mode of instructional delivery, then chances are you already have some learning resources, some activities in your course syllabus. You already have your lesson plan on how you deliver, what lessons, what topics are you going to discuss for every occasion or every schedule that you will be meeting your students. So we can start from there, and we can look at these activities, learning resources and activities, and try to see, are they relevant or appropriate to remote instructional mode of delivery. So again, that will be our first step. But there are also recommended instructional or teaching strategies. Again, if I go back to the survey that I mentioned earlier, this was what the teachers were asking. What are the strategies that I can implement, that I can use in designing my courses so that I can keep my students engaged and at the same time facilitate their learning? So first is micro-learning. It is a learning strategy that involves small, focused segments of learning that are each designed to meet a specific learning outcome. To put it in another way, learning is chunked so that the learner's cognitive load is kept at a reasonable level and giving them that heightened ability to absorb, recall, and retain. Because we are just talking of one key takeaway for every lesson or for every module, for every lecture that we give to our students. So this strategy also has the advantage of being easily accessible via mobile devices, especially in the Philippines. Probably most of our learners, if not all, will access the lesson using their mobile phone. So if we will be keeping our lectures, our modules shorter, then there is higher possibility or probability that they will be able to access it even just using their mobile phone and even with slower or lower bandwidth. So they can access it at the time that they need to use it, or during their break time. They don't have to devote or allocate extra time, and they can engage with the content if these are in short segments. So it is recommended that each chunk should be 5 to 7 minutes max. If you are doing video materials, then that's the recommended length of the video material, and will only have one key takeaway. Later, because in the process when UPOU does produce or produces this video material, some of our resource persons would say, I cannot possibly deliver the lesson in only 7 minutes. So there are also other strategies. If that is the case, then there are also other strategies wherein we can still follow this particular recommendation. So it is often a challenge in remote instruction that the lesson, compete with other distractions. So we know that, we are aware of that. And the thing is, because we are aware of it, then we have to really do something so that we can address that particular concern. So with micro-learning, we allow learners to take advantage of short breaks, as I had mentioned earlier, instead of having long hours devoted to a particular lesson. So it is more realistic to request the completion of bite-sized lessons in the morning or in the afternoon, instead of asking them to do so like for 2 hours or even half day. So note that this strategy can also be done in offline course. Remember that we have to note that not all of our students have access to the internet or have access to stable internet connection. So we have to think, if this is an offline resource, how can I chunk the lesson into something like this? So during the early years of UPOU, we were also offline. I mean, what we were providing to our students were printed materials. And what we did at the time was to write modules into chunkable pieces or biteable pieces. That's what we call. So that the student will engage with the printed material using just a short duration of time. So again, this is not only applicable to online learning, but can also be done even if you are using offline materials. So the other strategy, or the second strategy, is personalization. So which can involve some adjustments in the learning management system so that it will meet the specific needs or requirements of the learner. So I must probably caution some other teachers that not all learning management system can provide so much personalization. So it will really depend on what kind of learning management system we are using to teach our courses online. So like for instance, of course, there is this, the student can choose what profile pic to use in the online course site. In UPOU, at UPOU, in the courses that I am teaching, I'm not really that strict when it comes to the profile picture. Of course, I will appreciate if the student will show his or her real picture. But sometimes what I will see are dogs, cats, the whole family, etc., or even just a view. So, but I give it to my students. Probably they are more inspired when they see their family, when they see their pet with them, when they study their lessons. So that kind of flexibility I allow my students. But of course, it will also depend on the professor's policy. Some professors will really be so strict about it. So the other customization, and which will somehow cater to the different learning styles of our students, is when we provide the lesson in multimedia format. So it will not just be video. We can also provide the podcast, or even the lesson in text. So if I am more of a reader type of a person, then I would probably engage in the text format of the lesson. Or if I am more of a visual person, then I will be engaging in the video materials provided for that particular lesson. So it will also depend on the context of the learner. Sometimes he or she is in that context when he or she cannot watch the video, right? Can just listen to the podcast or can just read. So in providing that kind of what we call the multiple paths to learning, we are somehow providing that flexibility to our students in terms of personalizing their learning path. At UPOU, this making available of the lesson or the content in different formats, we do this in our massive open online courses, and which will also increase the accessibility of our courses, especially for those who are physically challenged. So they can still engage with the content, and they can still participate in the teaching learning process. So the third strategy is retrieval. And this is probably one strategy that we are all familiar with, we are all using. So retrieval practice is basically just asking questions to make learners recall information instead of just rereading material. So this is a usual practice in the classroom instruction, that after a lecture, we will be asking our students some questions in the form of graded recitation or probably in the form of quizzes. So in so doing, we are facilitating the recall. We are facilitating the recall of special or important concepts that our students should learn from the lecture that we gave. So asking and answering questions is probably, as I have mentioned earlier, something that we've all been doing. So it's fundamental in our teaching strategy. So in asking question again, we are emphasizing the important points that our students should be learning. In classroom setting, it is easy to do this, right? But how are we going to do it when we are teaching remotely? So in some cases, and even in offline materials, we have this self-assessment questions. So at the end of each lesson, mini lesson, if the material is printed, then we have this self-assessment question, which the student can answer. Of course, no one can force the student to answer it, but at least when we put it there, then probably it can also serve as a trigger for our students to also try to answer the question. And if he or she cannot answer the question correctly, then that is also a signal for the student to go back to the concept and relearn it. At the same time, also a trigger that this is something important and I should be able to learn it or recall it, because baka mamaya or there's a possibility that it will be asked during the exam. So I might as well learn it now. In online or synchronous session like this, we can also have polls or in the middle of our lecture. So we can also do that and try to see whether our students understood our lectures. So we can cut our lectures into shorter portion, ask them to answer a question related to the lecture, and try to see how many among our students have understood the concepts that we are trying to teach. So number 4 strategy is spaced learning. Again, this is something familiar to many of us teachers teaching in the classroom setting. This is the practice of repeating something learners learned over time instead of repeating it immediately after the lecture. So research suggests that this strategy helps learners refresh their knowledge and strengthen their memory of the content. So it can be done by presenting learners recaps of learned information, something like connecting the current discussion with the previous discussion, and in so doing, we are also facilitating the understanding of the new concept that we are about to teach, if we are going to relate it to something that we have discussed already. So again, we recall, we summarize, we do recap, something that we also do in classroom teaching, and something that we can also do when we do remote instruction, whether it's synchronously, like the one that we are having now, or asynchronously, meaning to say that the student will engage with the content in different time when he or she is able to do so. So we can just say, recall the concept that we have discussed in the previous lecture session, etc., etc. So in a way, we are emphasizing important points that the student should learn and connect it with the current learning. So the number 5 strategy here is feedback. It is a strategy that we are all familiar with again, and is considered to be critical for both learning and motivation. So if we are giving our students feedback, the student would know how am I progressing? What is my academic status? Am I passing? Am I failing? Etc. Am I doing well? If I'm buying for honors, how will I improve? How can I be sure that I will get a high grade for this particular course? Or I hope I am not failing because I want to graduate during this particular year. So giving feedback to our students would somehow motivate them, will keep them engaged, to our the activities that we have designed for our course. So it is very critical that we also inform our students why are their answers to the question, to the quiz, to the examination is right or wrong. So that is leading them to probably study harder, or if they want to improve their performance, also going back to the lesson that they should learn. So designing learning activities, we know that those instructional strategies will facilitate the engagement of our students. So when we talk of designing learning activities, we are also talking of the different activities that we will be asking them to do. So the first part, that component that I had discussed, is what we should be doing as teachers. Okay, instructional strategies. This time, let us look at the different learning activities that we can ask our students to do. First, for them to learn the lesson. Second, to keep them engaged. To keep them engaged, of course, for them to pass the course and for them to enjoy the course. So focusing on the learning process itself, I know will require different learning activities depending on the goals or the learning goals that we have set for the course that we are teaching. So those who joined us during the third webinar session, there was also a discussion of learning resources. And in a way, partly learning activities were also discussed, because learning resources can only make sense, or will make sense in terms of deeper learning, if we are going to have an attached learning activity to the learning resource. And somehow it will also facilitate or provide the opportunity for the learner to engage with the learning resources or the content. So in this slide, there are some learning activities that we are recommending. So like cooperative learning, presentations, which can be considered as the same as reporting in class, and something that can also be done in online class. If your class is offline, then it can probably be done some sort of reflection paper, such that the student will still be presenting something synthesized from the learning resource. So panel presentation, wherein students can ask a class reporter questions during the Q&A format. KWL learning activity is putting into a poster type of questions like, what do you know? What do you want to know? And how do you want to learn about it? In asking these questions, we are also asking our students to have self-reflection, to really assess. So what do I want to know? How do I want to know it? So there is the kind of processes that the student will engage in, and will keep him be part, or her be part of the course that we are teaching. So brainstorming is asking questions to discuss about the lesson, or even a case study related to the lesson. Creative media, this is something that probably the young generation, our students, will really enjoy doing. When we ask them to create multimedia material based on an issue or a situation that we have presented. So in the courses that I am teaching, I usually ask my students to do class reporting. So they will report on specific topics assigned to them, and they can have a choice of the format that they will use in reporting for the particular topic. So there are a certain number of students who will opt to do a video presentation. So it triggers their creativity if they will do something like this. And at the same time that they are learning the concept, by presenting them, providing the different video graphics, they are also enjoying doing that particular course requirements. So other activity, discussion. Again, if we are teaching online courses, then the learning management system has that discussion forum, wherein we can encourage or provide that platform for our learners to engage in discussion among themselves. They can exchange ideas. They can bring forward their thoughts on specific issues or lessons, and in the process engage them in constructing the knowledge, or even those who are subscribing to the paradigm of discovery, of discovering knowledge through the process of this discussion. Small group, we ask our students to work on specific projects, which can be of their own selection. So one example that I can give here is that I have mentioned earlier that in my courses, I ask my students to work together as a group on topics like social marketing, social mobilization. So I will just give them a very generic requirement like work on something that is development oriented or that will address a development issue. Now it's up to you what topic you would like to work on. How do you want to do it? So I give them that kind of flexibility so that they will be doing something that is of interest to them. Kasi it's difficult also if we're going to give everything to them. Let's give them that kind of control in terms of making decision. What specific topic is of interest to me, to my group, and I will work on that. So that feeling of satisfaction and accomplishment will also be there because we allow the student to have that kind of control and a decision to do something and at the same time fulfill the course requirements. So let's also give it to them. Case study, I have mentioned this already. It's analyzing a case study that we present to them, whether as an individual, can be done individually or as a group. Jigsaw is something that is interesting and challenging if we're going to design it as a learning activity for our online class. So this can be done by dividing a task into smaller parts, and then we ask a group of students to work on specific tasks, and then we ask them to go back after working on the specific task assigned to them. Then they go back and then put together all their outputs. In so doing, there will be that recognition of how important will their contribution will be in forming the whole. So it's not just that particular part that they will see, but they will see how they contributed to the construction of the whole product or output. So at the same time that they are engaged, we are also teaching them the value of teamwork and collaboration, something that is also important when we think or when we talk of the 21st century competencies. Learning Center, I think this is something that we also do even in conferences that and can also be considered even in an online classroom, but can be a challenge when we do it in an offline course. So something like there is a space for different learning activities, and a group of students will be in specific learning space at a particular period of time. World Cafe, I think for some conferences we do it that way. So at the end of the specified duration, each learner or group of learners should have gone through all the learning spaces. So it is something dividing them into a group. Even in synchronous sessions like this, we can also do that because in some Zoom account, there is that provision wherein our participants can be divided into smaller groups. So they can also be called learning spaces. Experiments, a learning activity which we are all familiar with and which can be done even in an online class. So one example that I do in my course is for students like to do a content analysis of the post of randomly selected classmates. So like for instance, they are 25 or in my courses, it's seldom that they are under 50, except for the doctoral courses. So I will ask them, okay, choose 20 or 30 posts of your classmates and analyze them in terms of their response to a particular issue that we are discussing. So in so doing, we are already asking them to engage in research. At the same time, they can also interact with their fellow learners. I can see their post, something like, can I use your post in my survey? So there is the kind of interaction that is also happening. And in so doing, we are again keeping our learners engaged in doing this kind of activity. In some cases, I also ask my students to do content analysis of Facebook posts, especially during this time of pandemic, the COVID-19 pandemic. How is social reality? How is meaning being created in the social media discussion? So they can also look at that. They don't have to go out. They don't have to even interact with people. They will just be doing desk research. But at the same time, we are keeping them engage. Of course, online survey is something that they can also engage in, or if allowed, then they can go within their community and also do some sort of interviews, etc. So again, it will call upon our creativity, the creativity of the teachers and deep understanding of the subject that we are teaching. And of course, always being guided by our learning goals so that we can design these different learning activities, achieve the learning goals, and keep our students or learners engaged in the whole process. So these are other learning activities that we can choose from, and something that we can consider in designing our courses. So again, I would like to repeat that the selection of learning activities should be guided by the learning objectives or the goals for the lesson. So we have here role-playing, simulation, laboratory, virtual laboratory can also be done, or a community laboratory or home laboratory. We already have many literature discussing how science laboratory can be done, or science experiments can be done at home. So something again that will call upon the creativity of our teachers, so that experiments like this can be done even outside the laboratory room. So we have here workshop, demonstration, especially if you are teaching a skill courses. So games, of course, role-playing, debate, competitions, question and answer. There are many activities to choose from, and there is a description here on how we can do these activities that we are interested in. Okay, so I have mentioned that the learning activities will not only facilitate the learning, but can also be designed to keep the learners engaged, develop that sense of community, even if we are in a virtual classroom, and somehow make the learning experience enjoyable to the students. So we should always be guided by our bottom lines. Now let's take a look at some other strategies to keep our learners engaged in remote teaching. So again, this time, how are we? What are the tips that we can add in the design of our courses so that we can further keep them or our students engaged? So as I had mentioned, being separated in time and space from the teachers, classmates, and other elements of the learning process, students in the remote teaching and learning mode will have the tendency to feel isolated. What we are saying is that, yes, you may be isolated, but make sure that you are still connected. So how are we going to do that? It is also important to note that research shows, and this is also our experience at UPOU, that students feel less engaged, and there is the tendency of 10 to 20% higher dropout rate in online courses. So mas mataas, higher dropout rate in online courses than in in-person or face-to-face instruction. Therefore, we teachers should find ways to connect more with our students in remote teaching and learning instruction. Among the reasons why learners do not finish courses is that they may feel lost, disinterested, or distanced. So in many cases, in the many years that I've been teaching with UPOU, and when we look at the dropping forms submitted to our students when they apply for dropping, the usual reason that they would give is time management. They have other responsibilities, etc. But what we really see when we read those reasons are probably there was a time that they feel lost, they felt disinterested, we were not able to keep them engaged, and time passed quickly, and then they just don't have any choice but to drop the course. So that's something that we hope we can really address in remote instruction. So what are these strategies? Okay, so rethink lecture formats. I have mentioned this already, the micro-learning. So we rethink shorter segments. Earlier, it was recommended 5 to 7 minutes only with one key takeaway. And if you really require more time to do your lecture, then it should take more than 15 minutes. And if possible, have breaks in between. I mentioned earlier about asking questions as a breaker in long lectures, so that we can still keep the interest, the level of interest of our students to the lecture, and also for us to determine whether they are still getting something or learning something from our lecture. It is also important, like they may want to take a break, then go back again to the lecture that we are giving. We can summarize key points after each concept or micro concept contained in our lecture. So again, when lecturing online via Zoom, just like what we have now, lecturers can administer poll. That's a feature in most online platform, or even send Google Forms to test the knowledge, retention, engage students' understanding of what we are discussing. Of course, there are also quizzes which we can administer. So it is important that in remote instruction, we maximize access to material for all students. Hence, it is suggested that we record all our lectures so that those who were not able to join us can also join or rewatch the lecture, and they can still engage with the material or with the lesson. This is especially true if we have students from different time zones, and they may be engaged in other activities which will make them not being unable to attend synchronous sessions like this. So of course, we also have to build a sense of community. So one reason really for dropping is they really feel isolated. There's no sense of belongingness. They are alone studying the lesson. They don't have friends or classmates with them while they are attending the lesson, especially now that we are enforcing this physical distancing. It is possible that they are engaging or listening to our lectures alone in their home. But at the same time, we have to note how can we build the sense of community in our classes. How can we make learning social in our courses? This is something that we do by getting to know. As teachers, we should get to know our students. Students, they should also get to know their classmates. They have to introduce themselves to the class. Teachers, we have to introduce ourselves. We have to set the tone that this is not a very strict class. This is something that we should be relaxing as we journey together in the class. So one recommendation that we give is that for there to be a welcome video from the teacher. And also in my courses, when I ask my students to introduce themselves, I really don't ask what kind of introduction they will do. I will just ask them, okay, introduce yourself and give information that you may want to share with your classmates. But I'm surprised that some of my students would also do the video introduction or introduce themselves via video. So some would also just post their picture and share some information about themselves. So as I mentioned, an initial assignment that I ask my students to do is to introduce themselves. So as I have shown here, I do a welcome note in my course guide, in the material that my students would first read. I also would ask them, so why are you taking this class? What is that is interesting to you about this particular course? So they get to share also what they have in mind and what they hope to learn from the course. So that kind of introduction can also give you an overview of who your students are, where they are, what are they doing, what are their contexts. And in a way that will also help you assess the kind of learning that they would need. And when they respond, when they submit activity reports, when they answer your exam questions, you would also understand the kind of context that they are in. And that's the reason why they are answering. That's the way they answer your questions. We can also encourage our students to keep in touch with each other. So here again, I am showing my course site. I have here a virtual coffee shop. They can interact with each other. They can discuss things outside the lesson. So that's the rule. You can discuss things outside the lesson as long as you are observing the etiquette and you will not be selling anything to your classmates. But it can be some relaxation for them if they feel so toxic already about the lesson. That is another forum that they can go to. But that's still within the course site. So many instructors are also looking at social media as ways to spice up their courses. So you can consider adding a Twitter badge to your course or even a Facebook page for your course. But in my case, for some students of the University of UPOU, they also use social media to connect with each other among themselves. And that is outside the teacher's site or view. So we allow that. For me, I also encourage that. Students forming online communities, community of learners, they can connect with each other, they can share resources, they can talk about their teachers, they can talk about us. So when I discuss this with my colleagues, they said, or they would inform me that, hey, our students have this Facebook group and they are discussing about us. And I said, oh, it's okay. Because we've been through that stage already. We were students before, and when we were with our friends or our classmates, our common topic is our teacher, and that's also true for our students. It's the only difference that their platform is the social media, and it's also true for us because when we're together, we're also discussing our students. So quits lang tayo, but we give them that space. So that they will have that feeling of that sense of community and even the sense of belongingness. And somehow, they will also have that peer support that they would probably need when the going gets rough. So, and they would also realize that if their journey is difficult, then they are not alone in that journey. So the kind of peer support that they would get from that online community of learners is something that, for me as a teacher, would treasure because I know that it is helping our students in this mode of instruction. It is also important that we give our students a sense of ownership and control. So if they are motivated and engaged, then they can have that higher chances of completing the course. So as I mentioned, one example that I can give here is giving our students some option on what projects, what assignments, what course requirements they want to do. And of course, especially if their context would not allow them to participate in some activities, then there has to be an option for them to take another or an alternative activity. So one example that I can cite here is in one of my courses, I usually ask my students to visit a publication house, a newspaper publication house, or a radio station. And they would interview, they would observe how news is produced. How news is produced when it is a newspaper. How news is produced when it is in radio. So they would visit the publication house, they would visit the radio station as a group. And they will arrange it among themselves. I'm already outside of the arrangement. They will form a group. They will do the schedule. They will do the coordination. The only thing that they will ask from me is for me to sign the letter of request, endorsing the activity and affirming that this is indeed part of the course that the students are enrolled in. But when the student is abroad or based outside the Philippines, sometimes it is not possible for the student to participate in that kind of activity. So there has to be another activity which will also achieve the same learning goal. So we have to give that kind of option to our students. There was also a time that we have detainees in my course. So definitely they will not be able to participate in that kind of activity. So there an alternative activity will have to be given to them so that they will also accomplish the learning goal. Of course, we also have to plan for delivery diversity. not just us lecturing, even in classroom setting. It is also important that we use video, presentations, etc. Even role playing, we ask our students to do role playing. Something that is also important, that our students will not just be seeing us every day or every time that we will meet. So plan for that diversity of delivery. The other tip is be a storyteller. Sometimes it is interesting to hear stories. So we assign stories, case studies to read related to the lesson. We ask them to watch video materials, and then we ask them to analyze the video materials. So in so doing, they are enjoying the story, but at the same time, we will ask them to look for the principles or concepts that are related to the lesson that they are supposed to learn. Or we can even ask a classmate to tell a story. If, like for instance, he or she is involved in doing a particular project, then we can ask the particular learner to tell the story of the involvement and ask the whole class to analyze, even up to the point of theorizing from that particular experience, why it happened that way, then what recommendations can you give, and why that kind of recommendation. Why are you giving that kind of recommendation for the improvement of the project implementation, for instance? So we are tapping another resource, learning resource, and at the same time, we keep our students involved in the whole process, because it's not just us who talks in the class, but even learners can participate and becoming learning resources themselves. We also need to regularly update our course content, especially if we are teaching remotely, and of course, even in classroom teaching. We have to make sure that our course remains relevant, especially if we are discussing or current issues that are related to the course. So we can discuss emerging trends, practices, news, current news, even conferences, proceedings, what were discussed. Because as we know, during conferences or academic fora, the experts gather and discuss things. So we can get ideas of what's current in the field or in the area that we are teaching. So one example that I have here, this is a course that I taught during the second semester, and when the COVID-19 pandemic was starting to hit us, I made an additional discussion issue in my class, which pertains to COVID-19. And I asked them to do a self-reflection on how COVID-19 is being communicated using various platforms, and what recommendations can they provide for better risk communication or even social mobilization, even up to the point of mobilizing people to wear masks when they go out. So at the same time that they should be learning concepts about communication, because that's the course that I am teaching, specifically social mobilization, social marketing, we are now relating it to the current issue, which is the COVID-19 pandemic. And whether we accept it or not, communication played a very important role on the behavior and reaction of the people when we were during the lockdown, and now that we are transitioning to the different levels of community quarantine. It is also important that we encourage accountability among our students. So, like for instance, they are students and they have responsibilities to do. So if we have noted that one, two, or few of our students are not participating, are not submitting requirements, then we also have to notify them. We can email them. In basic education, sometimes the teacher will call the student or even the parents to ask how the student is doing. Or if there is a problem, and the reason why the student is not participating in the class or even not submitting requirements. So we have to always emphasize that as a student in a remote instruction like this, they also have the responsibility to participate and be active participant of the learning environment. So it's important that we also check on them regularly. We also need to help students feel that they can succeed in our courses. So when learners feel that they are capable of succeeding, they are more likely to persist. Of course, in remote teaching, there may be students who will be lagging. So they are not on time in their submission of requirements. And that's the reason why teachers should always be mindful of the progress of each student. And then we can provide that kind of encouragement to our students that, hey, you can still catch up. Hey, there's still time. You just have to double up your time, double up, so that you can catch up with the lesson. So we have to provide that kind of a feeling instead of being too harsh with the student. Especially now, we don't know the kinds of problems that our students are facing. We don't know the context that they are in. We don't know how they are exactly, because sometimes they will not be telling us the whole thing, the whole story. At UPOU, this is what we are asking among our teachers. Let's be more accommodating, and let's be more flexible, so that we can accommodate the different contexts of our students. Of course, it does not happen every time, but even without the pandemic, students in distance education, like in the case of UPOU, we have students who are facing different concerns at the same time that they are studying. So we just have to understand, we just have to know, and we just have to provide the kind of flexibility without sacrificing the quality of instruction that we are giving to our students. So how, again, number 9, keeping the students engaged. Establish ways to monitor progress. Many of our learning management system provide this kind of basic learning analytics. And we will know, again, whether the student has engaged in the activities, whether the student has read the learning resources or viewed the video materials that we have asked them to do. So we can check the individual activities. When was the last time the student has logged in? What did he do when he logged in? How long was he there in the course site? So let's look for that kind of feature in our learning management system and try to use them so that we can monitor the progress of our students, and at the same time try to address concerns so that we can prevent dropout among them. In here, I also showed here that in the slide that in the learning management system that UPOU is using, and that is Moodle, I can also send an email blast to my students, like a reminder, something like, hey guys, next week it will be your final exam, or it will be the deadline for submission. Or I can even filter it in such a way that I will only be emailing students who have not accessed the course site for about a week and ask them, hey, I have noted that you haven't accessed our course site for about a week now. May I know what the problem is? And when the student receives, even if you send that email to 10 to 20, when the student received that, the student would feel that you are emailing him or her personally. So the student, hey, my teacher is concerned about my progress, etc. And there will be the need for the student to respond on or to answer the teacher's email. So again, let's take advantage of this feature of the learning management system and try to use them so that we can keep our learners engaged, and at the same time make sure that they are still with us in our courses. Of course, we also need to reward and celebrate success of our students, so we can give badges and certificates for every milestone that they will have in our courses. And of course, relate our class to the students' life, to the practical lessons, to what they see every day, to what they do every day. Let's try to relate the lessons and the concepts to what they are doing, to what they had experience. Again, communicate in multiple formats, not just email. We can call, provide active learning activities. Again, they can have hands-on activity. They're not just seated in front of their computer and interacting with you. Make them go out, make them interact with people, or make them do other activities aside from interacting with you. Interact with their classmates. So keep them engaged by doing this hands-on activity. And very importantly, we have to provide them with timely and useful feedback. I have discussed this earlier. Self-assessment opportunity. I also have discussed this in the form of self-assessment questions, or even a suggestion here is ask them to do an e-portfolio of all the things that they had done for the class. So they will keep them together, and they will also see their progress in your courses on from the first assignment or first activity up to the last activity. You can ask them to submit the e-portfolio, and also have that as part of your assessment of their progress in your course. So I have already discussed this, the accessibility for all, because in terms of online learning, this is something that we can also do and provide us. Online learning can provide us with this opportunity to engage even those who are not usually part of the conventional or face-to-face instruction because of many limitations. So here, I am showing an example of the course site that I have during the second semester when the COVID-19 pandemic hit us. Initially, of course, we didn't know that there will be this COVID-19 pandemic. So when the semester started in January, there were certain instructions, schedule that I provided to my student. But at the same time, when COVID-19 hit us, there were information that I needed to relay to my students, like for instance, the extension of classes, the rescheduling of final exam. So I use, for every opportunity that I have, I use the course site announcement board, one of the features of my online course site. So I use it so that I can provide updated information to my students. So in a way, I am also keeping my students engaged and asking my students indirectly always visit or regularly visit the course site, because that is where I am posting updated information that concerns you as a student of my course and even as a student of the university. So I am indirectly telling, by posting everything here, I am indirectly telling my student, engage with the course site. Always be there, because I am announcing information or important information there. So there is no more reason that my student cannot tell me, ma'am, na-miss ko po yung announcement. Then I can say, then probably you are not visiting the course site. The reason why you missed the announcement, because I always see to it that the announcement in the course site is updated. So there are many ways by which we can keep our students engaged. So I think this is my last slide, and this is the list of my references. I know that you could always go back to the recording of our session today. And if you want to go to the details of what I had discussed this morning, then you can also look at these different references that I use and which supplemented my discussion of my experience teaching in this mode of instruction. So thank you very much for listening. Again, useful sites. This is my template for all my presentation. The useful sites from UP Open University, our website, the networks, which is our OER repository. You can get have access to the open educational resources which you can use for your teaching. And of course, the model.upou.edu.ph, which is our platform for the free online courses, especially for our teachers who are now preparing for the opening of classes in the next school year. So thank you very much for listening. And if there are questions, I hope I will be able to answer them. So good day, everyone. Yeah, what we usually advise is for schools to do an orientation for the students. So they should know what kind of learning environment they will be in. Uh, because this is something new to them, something new to the teachers. So there has to be that kind of orientation. In terms of bridging program, if you feel the need for it, but in most cases, I don't see it because your course is designed in such a way that it is anchored on other courses, right? So naka-series naman yan. But it is important that our students would know how the course will be conducted throughout the semester or throughout the school year. So like for instance, what do they need to prepare? Will there be synchronous session like this? Or do they need to download apps? Yung mga ganun ba? So that's the kind of preparation that we can give to our students. So let's give it to them. I mean, at the start of classes, and if possible, include the parents. Include the parents or the guardians of our students so that they will also understand what kind of teaching learning environment will happen during the opening of classes. Yung syempre una kong sasabihin, the first thing that I will say is check whether you have a Tech for Ed center near you, because the Tech for Ed center can somehow provide connectivity and even access to computers. That's one. Let's also try to see for basic ed what DepEd has in terms of providing this. But at the same time, teachers or schools should also consider what is the context of our student. This is something that we discussed in webinar session 1, that in order for us to make sure that all students will be included in the teaching learning environment in the next school year, when we say no one is left behind, it is not just online that we are talking here. We can design our courses in such a way that there will be offline materials that they will have to engage in. Books, modules, printed materials, even video materials that are contained in a USB. Then they can use their television to watch these video materials. That is something that can be an option for us as well. The other day, I was interviewed in ABS-CBN, and I was asked the same question. Actually, the question was even more something like, are we highlighting the social inequalities given this pandemic and the kind of instruction that we will be doing? And I said, well, in the first place, social inequalities or inequity has been highlighted already, even before the pandemic, by the sheer dichotomy of public and private school. The resources available in private school, the resources available in public school, there is already that it's already very obvious that there is social inequality in terms of the resources available. And I said, probably what we need to worry about is the learning spaces for our students when they do the studying at home. So that's something that we need to address, because sometimes there's really no dedicated, and that's common to many Filipino homes. There's no dedicated learning space. It's good if our children are going to school because they will have a dedicated learning space there. So what do we need to do? We need to coordinate closely with the community. We need to coordinate closely with the tutors, with the guardians, with the parents. We need to work with them. And at the same time, let us also see what the community can offer as far as our students are concerned. What are the resources that the community can provide so that all the students will be included in the learning environment, even if we do the teaching remotely. Another example, and I'm not so sure if I have cited this already in one of our sessions, is that in one of the schools that I had the chance, that the principal, I had the chance to interact with the principal, is what they will do, and they are aware that not all of their students don't have access to the internet. So they will be printing all the materials, all the resources that the students need to have access to. And they will design the learning activities such that even if the student does not have access to the internet, the learning goals will still be achieved. So again, that will take creativity on the part of the student. So what they will do, they have this drop box where the students can drop the assignment, the parents, etc. So they can do that. If that is a problem, or they cannot do, the parents cannot drop the assignment, they cannot bring to the drop box, then they said, okay, let us know, because we will assign school staff to collect assignments, etc. So let's look at these resources. In one community, there was also this group of volunteers, retired teachers, mothers, like that. So they can form a group. They can have these volunteers. But what is important is for the school to be in touch with these groups, and if possible, also encourage the formation or creation of this group, which will help our students. So let's take a look at the resources that are available within our community, or the community where we are operating. Yung of course mas maganda yung mas maganda yung frequent yung feedback. So, yung iba, yes, kung pwedeng mail, yung Dropbox na sinasabi natin, pwede yun na ibibigay sa atin yung output nila. So like for instance, kapag katapos ng lecture natin, so may mga questions tayo, may mga ipapagawa tayong learning activities sa kanila, ganyan. And then, ang gagawin nila, ano yung learning activity na yon, then they can probably do that Dropbox thing, or they can the school can have it collected. Siguro kung hindi pwedeng sa school yung Dropbox, pwedeng sa barangay hall, doon na lang kukuhanin lahat ng isang staff noong eskwelahan. And then yung feedback natin, it can be a generic feedback. When next time that mag-communicate tayo with them, we can call them, or we can also have, kung talagang walang internet, talagang walang internet, di ba meron silang sinabi na yung sa we can use radio, di ba? So we can also try if that kind of particular resource is available in our community. Kung wala, edi ganun uli, isusulat ulit natin. Ganyan kami nung una sa UPOU, isinusulat namin lahat ng feedback namin. And then ito ay kinukolekta, binibigay sa mga estudyante through mail, or ibabagsak namin doon sa tinatawag namin ng mga learning center, at doon kinukuha ng aming mga estudyante. So ganun din po kami. So lahat ng materials namin printed, may mga assignments kami, isasubmit sa aming estudyante through the learning center or through mail, isusulat namin yung mga feedback namin, tsaka yung mga grade nila doon sa kanilang mga assignment or mga quizzes, ganyan. And then, binabalik namin sa kanila either through mail or through the learning center, or pick-up center, if you may want to call it, a pick-up center, where they can get this feedback from us. The important thing is for us to let them know that how they are progressing, whether they are understanding the lesson correctly. So it is important that we give it to them. Kung kakayanin natin ng weekly, na gano'n, depende sa resources din ng eskwelahan, then we do it weekly. Kasi parang isa-simulate din natin kahit paano yun nangyayari, at saka hindi masyadong magtatagal na walang communication tayo sa ating mga estudyante. So, kung kakayanin, kung may access sa telepono, kahit paano makukumusta natin sila, maibibigay natin. Kung nakita natin halimbawa na, oops, bagsak siya sa exam, pwede tayong pumili sino yung mas nangangailangan ng immediate response from us. So kung may access sa telepono, pwede nating tawagan, pwede nating sabihin, uy, ang iyong quiz, ang iyong assignment ay ganito, it seems na meron kang hindi naintindihan sa lesson, baka kailangan na balikan mo. Again, it will take resources on the part of the school, and in some cases, and this is a natural thing that is happening, yung mga passionate teachers natin, na even their own resources ang ginagamit nila just so that they can communicate with their students.
Thank you for joining us. We are DICT MC1 World Champion at World Summit on Information Society Prizes 2020 by International Telecommunications Union. We wish you a safe and blessed week. Please stay negative. Bye po!